Hello and welcome to The Communicative Leader, hosted by me, Dr. Leah OH. My friends call me Dr. O. I'm a professor of communication and a leadership communication expert. On The Communicative Leader, we're working to make your work life what you want it to be.
Croft, thank you for joining us today on the Communicative Leader. I'm really excited for our conversation. I love what you're doing with the body and leadership, because a lot of times I think a lot of folks still talk about it as if it's a performance rather than embodiment. And so to start with that, Croft, I'm wondering, in your experience, for leaders out there who've always relied on logic, on strategy, on these externals, how do you help explain the connection between their physical body and their ability to influence a room?
Question, by the way, and thank you for having me. The interesting thing about the body is we always kind of know it. So if a leader walks in the room, or any person walks in the room, we're already making assessments of that person, right? Is that somebody I want to follow? Is that somebody I trust? And that's all based on what? Our visual, mostly, of their body. So I look at this idea, and I'm not the only one, but the body is a holy grail of leadership, of change, of all these things, because how I show up in my body determines what are the conversations I can have. How are we going to be in a relationship, right? And the body's an amazing thing. To your point, it's not just a performative thing. It doesn't just get us from A to B. It's actually determines what's possible. If I want to love, I have to have a body that can love. If I want to be firm, I have to have a body that can be firm, whatever it is. So the body is just an amazing thing, and how we show up in it determines what's possible.
Yeah. And let's continue with that, because I know you have a new book out. Congratulations.
Yes. Thank you.
This title is very evocative. And so I'm hoping you can walk us through the metaphor of the liquid accordion and how it represents a leader's ability to expand, to contract, and their presence in high pressure moments.
Yeah. So the actual title, the liquid accordion, came from a lot of the research I was doing. I've been interested in this thing called leadership for 40 plus years, and then started through my coach training and various other programs, a lot of deep somatic work. And I'm also a mentor coach of new coaches. The most common question I would get, I don't understand the body. Why the body? What is this thing called the body? And I started looking back on my learning, and there was always just, we coach in the body. But I was always curious, well, why? And so the title actually came from some research, and there's I would say it's a great book, but I'm a somatic geek, by a guy named Dr. Kellerman, that was published probably in the 70s. And it's called Emotional Anatomy. And in there, he looks at how we create emotions in our body. And so I started looking into it. But the idea is it's actually pretty profound for me, is if you think about it, the body's made up of cells. And some estimates are up to 70 trillion cells, lots of them, by the way. But if we look at a cell, what can a cell fundamentally do? Only really can fundamentally expand and contract, because all a cell is this little water balloon. It's got some DNA, it's got all that structure, but how it navigates the world is through expansion and contraction. So if we then take one cell, in our case, we look at skin cells, what do? They form layers. And now we have layers of cells that expand and contract. So you think about your skin on a cold day, it contracts. Well, layers form tubes, right? So think veins and arteries. What do? They expand, they contract, expand, contract. Tubes form organs, the heart, the stomach, the lungs. What are they? Expand, contract. What do muscles do? They expand and contract. So we, at any given time, are this combination of all of this expansion and contraction, which even more profoundly, that's actually how the body creates moods and emotions. So if you think about this, we are this body, we're navigating the world, and the brain, which is part of the limbic system, all of the sensors for the brain are the body. The eyes, the ears, the nose, the skin, the mouth, the heart, the gut, the genitals, the hands, the feet, all of these data collectors collect data, which goes to the brain and says, there's danger, there's peace, whatever it is. And so it's this liquid accordion that then determines not only it determines how I see the world. Right? So if my body is contracted like this, I see the world differently than if my body is expansive. And so that's where the title came from. And it was one of those where we're a liquid accordion. That's how we navigate the world. And then that determines how the world shows up for us, because that determines what we see or what we experience.
Yeah, that is fascinating. And you're right, when you bring it down to the cellular level, that's something I find on the show, is that we have all these complex thoughts, but it's really the folks who can simplify it and present it, frame it in a way that helps others who aren't immersed in that make sense when you're really, really leading. And you're right, thinking about that at all those levels, that expansion and contraction.
Yeah. Right. So just a simple example I use for people is if you think about a grandparent who their 3-year-old grandchild is coming up the driveway. Well, how are they going to, what is their liquid accordion shape going to be? It's going to be down low, arms wide open, big smile on the face saying, come here. Take that now and think about how a linebacker is going to be standing in the middle of a game when they're about to hit somebody. They're on their toes. There's tension, there's energy, their body's ready to hit something. Well, imagine if that, as a grandparent, if that was how I showed up when my grandchild was coming up the driveway. My grandchild, who knows nothing of all of this, would likely turn around and run, right? And all I did is show up in a shape, but that shape is so powerful. And again, most of us are blind to this because we think we're fundamentally a brain on a stick, right? And that's how we navigate the world. And I solve all these problems and blah, blah, blah. But what we don't see is that I assess the holy grail is the body. If I show up as open, I'm open. But I can't say I'm open if my body isn't open. Right? People just go, I don't buy that.
Yes, I'm laughing because I have a child in adolescence who is like, it's fine, right? I'm listening, and like nothing about it is communicating that. And so I'm like, can see that. Having these conversations.
Well, we kind of know it, but a lot of times what happens in my experience is we get so in our stories. And so we're talking to our teenage child and we say, will you clean your room, or how are you doing? I'm fine. And we go, okay, they're fine. But yet our gut says, no, something's wrong. Right. And we notice that. If you think about great actors, what do? They actually embody the character, right? So in that moment, they are angry. They are happy. They are feeling sadness. So if you ever watch a movie with a really bad actor or actress, what happens? We go, I didn't buy it. Right? But a scary movie, when they're truly scared, we're truly scared because that's where the energy comes. And we're fundamentally blind to it. I think we know, we know a lot about language. We know a fair amount about moods and emotions, but we know very little of the body other than that kind of medical, biological, this happens. But we're kind of blind to it as, well, this is how we communicate. It's in our body.
Exactly. And so let's continue with this, beyond automatic reactions. And I know we've probably all been in a meeting or a stressful situation. We just kind of realize we're shutting down. Croft, I'm wondering, what is one physical tell? Maybe it's a breath or posture, things that we can check in on where we realize, oops, I'm out of leadership flow and I'm now in this defensive posture.
Well, part of the challenge with that is in that moment, because let's say I'm triggered, all of my body, my being is going, here's the breakdown. So the challenge is being self-aware to go, oh, wait, I am in that. Now, if I can do that, though, here's what's really powerful about the body. If I shift my body, I automatically shift what I'm seeing. Simple example, I have one of my coachees would get really fired up in meetings. And so in that moment, he was like a different person and he was just coming down on people. So we came up with a very simple homework. And his homework in the meetings was to sit with his hands open under the table. And I said, the only thing you can't do is contract your hands. He's like, okay. But what was funny was if he couldn't contract his hand, he couldn't be angry, right? Because if I get angry, what am I likely going to do? The first thing I'm going to do is clench my fist, which engages all of these muscles in my core. I'm going to clench my jaw. Conversely, if I relax my hands, moods and emotions can't follow. I can try it, but I can't be as angry. The practices in the book we talk about, they're called pivot points. And there's 4 places in the body that hold kind of an undue influence on the body. One is the eyes. I can just relax my eyes. Another is my jaw, right? If, for instance, if you were to relax your jaw and just keep a gap between your teeth, your emotions can't really get revved up because to rev up your emotions, you're going to have to close your jaw. And then the other ones are the hands, obviously, and then the feet, because the feet are where we connect to the earth. So there's all sorts of them, but I always, if somebody's, their challenges are getting too kind of wound up, I usually actually focus either on the hands or the jaw.
Okay.
And so I'll have them just relax your jaw.
Yeah.
And two things happen. One is as they're focusing on the jaw, they're not focusing on whatever it is. And then as they relax the jaw, or as we as humans relax the jaw, I'm now more relaxed. I have to be. Because the body is how the liquid accordion determines how I see the world.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that. I was thinking, I bet your coachee, when you're saying, like, here's your homework, keep your hands open under the table. He's probably like, oh, okay. And then I imagine that conversation when he came back to the next meeting was like, it worked. I was a different person.
Well, it worked until he clenched his hands and then he was back to, right?
Yeah.
But then we then started to look at what have you been practicing? Well, what he'd been practicing, he was very good at getting wound up. He wasn't good at, in these meetings, relaxing. So the hands became a new way to practice.
Yeah.
So he learned how. Now, doesn't mean that all of a sudden, I practice it for a week and I'm this new person, right?
Yeah.
Because in his case, all our cases, he had been practicing his whole life. So this new practice is going to take a while to take hold. But then that's why if we want transformation, many times there's a correlation between that and finding some sort of hot discourse or practice, i.e. martial arts, meditation, yoga, where I can actually learn how to control, I don't like to use the word control the body, but connect with my body and then have the ability to influence my body in whatever.
Yeah, that is so powerful. And so let's continue with your work in high stakes environments. So, Croft, I know you've spent over a decade working with oil refineries, mining operations, where there's really a slim margin for error. And I'm wondering, how does your somatic coaching change the way a leader communicates safety and trust in these physical environments where it's literally a matter of life and death?
Well, it's the holy grail. In a lot of those environments, the challenge is because it is life and death, our body's already on a natural alert, right? There's already tension. So my background is in the military. And it's interesting. One of the things the Army taught me how to do was how to armor up, how to be ready for that, right? Which can serve me in those environments. It's a harsh environment. I need to be on my toes. I need to be focused, this and that. But then that also can create the shadow side of it, which is now I'm not open to a conversation. So it is still, it doesn't matter whether the high stakes are underground in a mine or the high stakes are in a boardroom. It's the body doesn't know the difference. That's the body that shows up. So if I learn how to relax, right? And the other thing we practice a lot is how do I find center so I can be in choice? So yes, there's chaos going around me, whether it is physical combat, a harsh environment, or a difficult conversation. How do I show up in my body so I actually have choice? And instead of my body taking over, which it does have a purpose, right? In that moment, if you think about the life or death moments when there's an explosion or a car crash or whatever, our body actually takes over, right? The amygdala kicks in and boom, we're taking action. There's a purpose for that. But if I'm in a boardroom and I'm in a long conversation, I'm not life or death. But my body is taken over, and instead of going, oh, wait, let me relax, let me shift my body, and now I can shift the conversation.
Yeah, that's so helpful.
If you think about, if you've ever had the opportunity to meet somebody who's just very, like a spiritually powerful and impactful person, like a Dalai Lama type person, what I always marvel at is they show up, and their body's already showing up in a conversation, which is, we're going to love, we're going to be fine. And even if I show up in a negative energy, their body is more powerful than mine in the sense that they're going to be there in the peace.
Gosh. And so let's continue with this. And we're going to come to co-regulating, which I know is different, but we'll touch on that in a little bit. But when I was preparing for our conversation, I learned that you use ontology in your coaching. And I love this. As a professor who teaches philosophy of science, I usually don't see ontology outside of the classroom. And so folks, if you don't know ontology, the study of being. So Croft, I'm wondering, how does changing the story we tell ourselves about a conflict actually change how we physically show up in that moment for the conversation?
Well, that's in coaching a lot. Why I say the body is the holy grail. I can change my story, but if my body hasn't changed, what's going to happen is it's going to circle back to the same story, right? But if I have that awareness of, oh, I'm triggered, I'm in a story. Let me find somehow a shift in my body. So now I can show up. The story starts to disappear, right? And if we look at deep therapeutic modalities, I've done a lot of somatic body work. There's a thing called TRE, tension and trauma reducing exercises.
Okay.
What happens, the idea is the mood or emotion that is stored in the body. So in that moment, I'm in that story. Well, if I let go of it somatically, if it's no longer in my body, I can't have that story. Right? So a lot of times in coaching, we get seduced by the story. And then what did your boss say? And right. But if I shift the body, that's where the real transformation comes. And so that can be super powerful, but a lot of times I'm unaware of my body, or the coachee is unaware of their body. And so they're just in the story. And I find that just shifting the story may be a short-term fix, but it's kind of like saying, I'm positive, right? I'm positive. But if the body is going, no, you're not, it's not going to line up. We look, my background is in ontological coaching with the idea, the observer we are, sees and takes actions, gets results. So we call that the OR model. And then we shift, because then we say, we look at it as humans. We have a body, we're emotional beings, we're linguistic beings. And it's the congruence of those three things. My story aligns with my body and my emotional space, and now I'm congruent. Yeah, I am truly at peace.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But if my story or one of the three of them is out of whack, okay, there's that lack of congruence.
Yeah, I was thinking when you were talking about that, it's, going back to the really talented actors who have that in they feel it in their body. It's, you can shift the story, but we need them. It's like them shifting scenes. Like they're no longer in that angry conflict. They're in the coffee shop scene. So it's completely different. Yeah. Way of showing up.
Yep. And what's funny is the liquid accordions we are, most of us, what we do is that's how we then navigate the world.
Okay.
Right now I'm angry, and then I'm happy, and all these things.
Oh, yeah.
And in ontological coaching and ontology, we look at, well, wait, let's observe your observer. Let's observe what is your story, what is your body, what is your emotional space. And if I can develop practices where I can actually start to shift that. An example I use is, if we go back to COVID, and I'm not getting into the politics, but in COVID, there was a very strong mood, right? The sky is falling, the sky is falling, the sky is falling. Well, after a while, we started practicing that, and notice, for most of us, that 20 to 22, 23, whatever that time, it was kind of a haze, right? Because we were just in this funk, and we were all, and many people I would assess still haven't left it. And that's not a judgment, I'm just observing. But how do I shift and let go, and then choose, how do I want to be in this situation? So a lot of what I'm doing in coaching is just having people go, oh, so if X happened, how do I want to be with that?
Yeah.
Right. And I actually have a choice, but I may not have the skill to get there, because my body may be so armored up or so triggered that I don't really have a choice, because my body is trumping.
Yeah. So let's continue with that, because you've mentioned being centered before, and part of this is, figuring out where your body is now. So I'm wondering, Croft, if you could share a short, a 30-second somatic practice or some sort of centering technique that a leader can use, whether they're walking into a challenging meeting or a big performance review, whatever it is. What's something we can actually do at work?
Well, it goes back to something our parents told us. It's something we all do every moment of our lives, which is breathe, right? So if you think about it, I cannot control my heartbeat. I can, however, influence it, in the fundamental tool I use in my body is breath, right? If you look at elite performers, what they do in that moment of high performance is they're breathing normal. Right. So we just came off the Winter Olympics, and you'd see the person doing the triple jump or whatever they did. In that moment, their body was actually breathing like they do every time they practice it. You or I, on the other hand, if we went down the ski jump and right, our breathing is doing this. So breathing is one of the most simple and powerful techniques there is. I assess it's kind of the fundamental centering practice, because if you look at yoga, Tai Chi, martial arts, meditation, all of them have what as part of their practice? It's breathing. And so many times it's exactly what your grandmother said, take a deep breath. But usually what happens is we don't take the deep breath. If the person who says take a deep breath goes, take a deep breath, but actually what they would be more powerful to do is, let's collectively take a deep breath.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And let's take about 6 seconds in and about 6 seconds out. If I do that 3 times, that's 36 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
But I would challenge anybody who is in a fired up state, a trigger state, whatever we call it,
Mm-hmm.
try that and see if you're not a different observer after 36 seconds.
Yeah.
And what do we do in those moments when we go on stage? All right,
Yeah.
let's do that.
Exactly. Yeah, that's so helpful. And you're right. And it is helpful because I think you're, a lot of times we hear about the importance of breathing and obviously we recognize it. But like you said, sometimes it's like one breath. A lot of times it's shallow. It's from the chest. And then we're like, that didn't help. And then we move on. Right?
Yes, because you didn't actually do that. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a helpful way to check in with that. And so another thing you've mentioned is this idea of flow. And I know that in preparing for our chat, you talk about leadership as being similar to rafting down a river with different classes of rapids. So, Croft, how do you see a leader's communication style shifting as they move from a class 1 day to a class 5 organizational crisis?
Well, if they're really centered and good at what they do, it may not change, right?
I love
Because
that.
I've
Yeah.
practiced, right? Go back to I use the example of Michael Jordan in game 7 of an NBA finals. Yeah, he may up his tempo a little bit, but his focus is still there. He's still going to have the conversation. So as a leader in those moments, what usually happens is in that moment, we don't actually have the story anymore. The story has us. The sky is falling. Oh gosh, the sky is falling. I got to do my thing. As opposed to going, okay, that's a story. How do I want to be with that story? Right. And that's where the practice of remaining centered. The founder of Aikido, one of his students said, Master, you look like you're always centered. He said, no, I'm not always centered. I'm paraphrasing. I'm just better at getting back to center. So can I, in that moment, be in choice, knowing that in choice, my body may say no, but right now I need to be decisive. I need to go forward, but I'm doing that because I'm choosing that, not because that's my default, right? So a simple analogy, I have this toolbox with all these tools, but if in crisis situations I grab a hammer and start hitting anything, probably not going to be effective. Occasionally, right?
Yep.
But can I, in the moment, go, okay, which tool is best going to serve me? The way I do that is being centered and operating from choice.
Yeah, I really like that metaphor. And you're right. A lot of folks do grab for the hammer right away in crisis, and then we just extend it.
Well, and go back to the body. The reason we do that is our body is already triggered saying, well, here's how I solve these problems. And so the body bows up. We get tension in our body that says this action, right? Because in the past, we're historical beings. And in the past, that's gotten us results. And so in that moment, we are already triggered, right? That's why if you think about people in the moment, I'm not aware of me because I'm doing what I do. Right? The mastery comes from in that moment. Can I be present to go, wait, I'm triggered. Let me relax my jaw. Let me take a deep breath. Let me open my hands, whatever I need to do to slow down and then operate. Ultimately, if I'm effective, I'm operating from what do I care about? Oh, I care about the organization succeeding right now. Okay, how am I best going to do that? I'm going to best serve that by showing up as my best self, which could be I have to be very decisive. That's fine. But it also could be maybe what I need to learn how to do is slow down and not make a decision. Let my team actually struggle with the breakdown so they grow or whatever the case may be.
Yeah. And like you're saying, then you're not on autopilot and you're making the choices rather than following your body.
For a while I did Tai Chi. I had an amazing teacher. And one of the things I remember him vividly saying was he said, and he was quite successful in Kung Fu. And he said, all he really did in competitions, his practice, he realized, was to simply remain centered. Because if he was in some sparring event with somebody, what he was waiting for was them to get off center. And then he had a choice of how does he take action to deal with that. And I remember that, and I was like, wow, what a powerful place. You're going to come at me, so to speak, and I'm just waiting for you to overextend, and then with very little effort, I can take care of what I want to care. But to do that, I have to be in choice.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So. And all of the practice that goes into that choice.
Yes.
Yeah. So, Croft, let's talk about cultivating others. And I know that's part of your framework. And I'm wondering, you talked before about breathing with others. So how does a leader's own embodied presence help to co-regulate or influence the nervous systems of other team members?
Well, if you go all the way back to being a baby, right? What research says, if we take a baby and when a baby starts to be aware and their vision starts to come in, what the research says is that when there's a loud noise or something, the baby's immediate move is to look to the face of its caregiver. And what they're looking for is, how am I supposed to react? So they look to the face, and if there's a loud noise in the face, then they go. They do that, and then that creates the emotions that in that body creates, oh, this is must be how I solve that. Well, fast forward 30 plus years, we're still humans. We're still connected. So what happens is, on some level, most of us show up and we go, how are we supposed to react with this? Well, what is my boss or my leader doing? So if they show up in chaos, it's probably chaos.
Yeah.
Right. And so the team actually feeds off of that. I've always maintained that actually the biggest role of a leader is to show up in an emotional space, which includes the body, that says, my emotions are going to be more powerful than everybody else's. So I'm going to show up and everybody else is screaming, the sky is falling. I'm going to calm them by how I show.
Yep.
And if I do that, then I can say, okay, here's how I want to be. But again, many times as leaders, there's the one person on the team or the event that now I'm reacting to that instead of actually saying, no, this is how I'm going to show up. So I think to your point, it's absolutely critical. And whether we're aware of it or not, it's already happening. So how I show up is going to determine how my team shows up.
Yeah.
Right. And then you see it when a new leader comes in and all of a sudden the team, we don't know how to act. Because the leader hadn't said what's safe emotionally. Here's the how we're going to show up. But when that starts to become clear, people start, here's why it is safe to maybe challenge something, or here's why it's safe to raise your hand and say, I did it. Early in my Army career, I had a battalion commander that was just kind of a tyrant. And so when we would have staff meetings and he would say, all right, who wants to do this? Well, people immediately would just kind of, right? And his replacement came in, and his replacement truly wanted us to be a high-performing team. And I remember the first meeting, he said, hey, who can help with this? And everybody was diving for their foxholes, because in the past, they go, this is how we're going to be. And it took us a while to realize, no, it was actually safe to go, I would love to, or right. And that leader, how he showed up, determined what conversations we could have. But many of us were shell shocked from the previous leader because he taught us, no, you don't want to be somebody who steps up and volunteers.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing I keep thinking about is, you mentioned this is going to happen whether you're aware of it or not as the leader. And so I think that's such a powerful reminder. If you're not aware of this, you are likely not putting out what you hope you're putting out or think you're putting out. So is really important reminder to check in and think about your body, think about what it's communicating.
Well, we look, a distinction we use, moods and emotions are a predisposition to action.
Okay.
Right. So if I'm in an emotional space, which serves us, right? I'm scared. Oh, I've got to protect, or I'm open, right? Whatever it is. Well, then as a leader shows up, whatever mood they show up in is going to influence the team. But what if they show up and their mood and emotion is relatively weak, and there's somebody on the team who has a very strong? We're collective beings, right? Moods and emotions. There's also group moods and emotions, right? We talk about flow. There's group flow. Teams are created in this. And then because of this awareness of the body, so how I show up emotionally and the body has already determined what's possible in those conversations, right? And we have all been to meetings where the leader walks in the room and you can hear like a gasp, like, oh, this isn't going to be fun, like instantly. Yeah, because that's how the leader showed up.
Yeah.
I have a very senior leader that I'm coaching right now, and it's interesting. He loves this because he is always really trying to show up. He's self-aware of what emotional space am I in? And this is a person who's very high up in the military and has a very big responsibility right now, which obviously he's concerned about what's going on in the world, but he's also very aware of how am I showing up that is perpetuating what's possible in this team or shutting it down. And that's one of his fundamental focuses every day, every moment, every conversation.
That's amazing. I love it. As a leadership scholar, I mean, just music to my ears, right? Yeah. It's beyond like, what is that list of bullet points I was hired to do, and thinking in a much more holistic and expansive way about impact.
Yes, absolutely.
So, Croft, I have two final questions for you, and this is the way we end all episodes of The Communicative Leader. And the first part is, what do you want to leave our titled leaders with whether it's a challenge, a tip, advice, something about a body audit, whatever in your line of expertise. And then the second part is, what is the advice for employees of all ranks, or the challenge or the tip?
So I would say that for leaders, the biggest leadership challenge we have is ourselves. So I'm a huge proponent of self-mastery. If I can get me out of the way, leading others is relatively simple. But most of us, we struggle with ourselves. I get in my own way. I get in my stories. I get in my emotions. So my ability to show up and lead myself is my fundamental challenge, which then if I'm on a team, it's the same thing. People say, oh, my boss is a jerk. Okay, have a different conversation with your boss. You still have options, right? But what happens is the boss shows up as a tyrant. You go, oh gosh, I've lost all of my ability to have any influence, instead of saying, this isn't the conversation I'm going to have. I'm going to have a different conversation, which they may say you're fired. Okay, I'll go somewhere else where there's conversation to have. So it's always about self-mastery. And then as we go deeper, as an ontological coach, what are your stories? What are your emotional spaces? How is all that living in your body? Because how all of that's happening is going to determine how you see the world. So we see the world not as it is. We see the world as we are.
Yep. Really powerful, Croft.
Thank you.
There's so much that I'm thinking about and being mindful of. Embodied. Sitting here with my hands open under my desk, these things that I know that I will revisit, and I know that will be really helpful to our listeners as well. So thank you for sharing your time, your expertise, and the good work that you're doing.
Well, thank you. And thank you so much for having me on the podcast, and looking forward to future conversations.
All right, my friends, that wraps up our conversation today. Until next time, communicate with intention and lead with purpose. I'm looking forward to chatting with you again soon on The Communicative Leader.